What is going on, everybody? I'm your host, John Ramdeen. This is Fight News Now. I'm joined by my good friend, Robin Black. We are looking at the heavyweight division in mixed martial arts. Coming up this weekend, Amsterdam will play host to UFC Fight Night. Andrei Arlovski, Alistair Overeem, UFC 200, which is down the road. Cain Velasquez, the former heavyweight champion. Travis Brown, who believes that this is his heavyweight title fight. And of course, you can't blame the guy because Cain Velasquez, arguably the best heavyweight of the last 5 years. And of course, Stipe Miocic and Fabrizio Verdum, the current champion, will get it on at UFC 198. And of course, Stefan Struve and Bigfoot Silva. I was last night, it was at Empire MMA in Barrie, and I was talking to Kareem, your guy. And he said, we all recognize how good Stipe Miocic is. We understand that he's an athlete that can get the job done. Why don't people like this guy? Kareem admires him. We all admire the type of athlete and the fighter that he is. How come the masses haven't jumped on board? Will they do that if he manages to become the heavyweight champion?
Well, does anybody, who is a huge Verdum fan outside of Brazil and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people? We are. Yep. But is everybody, outside of Brazil, are Americans, do they know who the heavyweight champion is? Maybe as much as you listed off all of those great heavyweight fights coming up, right now there's great fights at middleweight, there's great fights at welterweight, lightweight's probably never been better. Maybe they're just getting lost in the mix a little bit. Verdum is one of the best fighters of all time, not only one of the best heavyweights of all time, and Stipe's a guy with a legitimate chance to dethrone him, particularly if he gets his feet moving, gets Verdum chasing him and turning into him, and catches him with those shots. His feet move extremely well, he changes direction extremely well, so when he ends up over here and Verdum has to come and find him, he finds Verdum. That's how he's got to try to win this fight, because he cannot win it off on the ground.
You mentioned all the different divisions. Right now, middleweight outstanding, 155 pounds. We have Eddie Alvarez taking on Fabrizio Verdum's teammate and the current champion, RDA, for the championship, which will go down live right here on Fight Network. But you look at Fabrizio, we talk about all those other big fights and the other divisions. The heavyweight division is supposed to be the marquee division. Traditionally in boxing, everybody knew who the heavyweight champion was, so everybody looks at the heavyweight division and you look at it, and I mentioned it before, the heavyweight division I don't think has looked as good as it does right now. You have to look back in history, the time where Randy Couture and Pedro Hizzo and Maurice Smith and Mark Coleman and all those stallions were controlling the division. And then it went through a kind of a lull where the stars were, yes, Andrei Arlovski was there, Tim Sylvia was there, Frank Mir was there, but then you had Justin Eilers and Paul Buentello and guys that weren't the marquee fighters that you see ranked in the top 10 right now. And you look at all those guys, they match up very well with each other. And MMA math, it just doesn't make sense because one guy, number 10, will beat number 4, and number 1 will lose to number 7, and just that's the way things work.
And maybe that's why, you should know Verdum. Verdum has beaten some of the very best heavyweights ever, and he's done it consistently. You should know who this guy is. He should be a big deal when he fights outside of Brazil, not only in Brazil, but everywhere. But maybe it is because there's so much parity. Maybe it is because Dos Santos loses to this guy who loses to that guy who Dos Santos beats. That's part of the game. Sometimes when there's like one definitive great is when people know who everybody is. Verdum really, really laid one on Cain Velasquez. If he can do it to Stipe, and that's no easy task, and if he can keep doing it, then we'll know. And I think sometimes you need that dominant figure at the top.
Well, I know the Brazilians will be very, very biased, but if you're unbiased and you look at the heavyweight division objectively, a lot of people will say that Fabrizio Verdum, there's an argument to be made that he is the greatest heavyweight of all time. The fact that he defeated Fedor Emelianenko, that he defeated Minotauro, that his fingerprint, he's defeated Cain Velasquez, stopped Cain Velasquez, who a lot of people believe is the best heavyweight of the last 5 years. You knock out the former K1 champion Mark Hunt, you beat the former K1 and Strikeforce champion Alistair Overeem. On top of that, again, his fingerprints all over mixed martial arts. He was the guy that went to Croatia to help Mirko Cro Cop learn jiu-jitsu. Mirko Cro Cop, at the time, one of the biggest heavyweights. He garnered attention. He made people tune into the heavyweight division. On top of that, you mentioned the jiu-jitsu community. This is one of the best, if not the best, heavyweight, maybe jiu-jitsu practitioner across the board in mixed martial arts. ADCC champion, so he's a real martial artist. And then you follow his roots, that shoot-a-box team from Curitiba, now King's MMA. it's a no-brainer where a lot of people would believe that Verdum is the greatest of all time.
For sure. And hey, man, if you go do a little jiu-jitsu, whether it's in your spare time or you compete, you see what a beautiful sport it is. And when jiu-jitsu came in, and in UFC 1, we were all like, who is this little guy in the pajamas, and how is he choking people? And what was that? What happened there? It was fascinating. We all suddenly understood this was a premier martial art in the world. Jiu-jitsu's not cool right now. It's cool to us who do it. It's cool to people who study it. It's cool to jiu-jitsu nerds like many of us watching here. But the UFC has celebrated
punchy kickies.
They have celebrated the big knockouts. They have rewarded fight of the nights for guys who stand and bang, guys who trade, guys who do that. That has been what has been celebrated. That has been what has been presented. That has been what the audience has bit. And so as a result, being brilliant at jiu-jitsu does not quite garner the attention it once did. And maybe it's the job of those of us who get a chance to talk to people who it's on us to make sure that they understand how good Verdum is.
We're talking about Verdum and Stipe Miocic. Well, I know there's going to be one guy on that card in Brazil that is certainly waving the jiu-jitsu flag, Damian Maia. And when you see this guy perform, you become an instant fan, even if you're not a fan of jiu-jitsu. But we'll get back to that at a different time. The heavyweight division, when you look at it, do you think that in a year's time, 2 years' time, that it's going to go through a number of changes?
I think it will. I suddenly am obsessed with the jiu-jitsu conversation right now as it relates to Verdum. Part of what just hit me is, yes, jiu-jitsu practitioners, the hundreds of thousands of them, the millions of them, love the Damian Maias and the Gunnar Nelsons and Verdum. Yeah. But the art of Brazilian jiu-jitsu has started going down its own trail, much like every other martial art does, because in a vacuum where you can't punch and elbow, jiu-jitsu takes on a different shape. And people who love the sport of jiu-jitsu, many of them actually don't watch mixed martial arts. And mixed martial arts fans have started to understand jiu-jitsu less and less. So I think that's part of the game. I think that's part of why we find ourselves where we are. But if Verdum can beat Stipe, then, Verdum, hey, trying to play these puzzle pieces never works. But Arlovsky's in a position to say, let me fight for the title. He is big and interesting.
Is Overeem as well?
Yes. Sorry, I meant Overeem. Yeah. I get these two guys confused because they're friends and they train at the same gym. Overeem, I believe, is in that position. Overeem, there's many things that I think we underestimate about him as well, and that is pure technical skills. We think of how big and powerful he is. We think of him knocking guys out. We think of horse meat, and we think of the ream, and we think of his video. We think of a lot of things, but I think we often don't think of his smooth, elite technical kickboxing skills. And I think he's in a position to try to use those and get Arlovsky out of there in the first couple of rounds. If we're going 5 rounds, that he hasn't looked good as fights have gone on. So that's going to be an element. That one's going to be fun to watch.
One of the things, we look at this main event coming up in Rotterdam, Overeem and Andrei Arlovsky, both guys into their 30s, and again, I'm not suggesting that these guys are going to retire, but when you have as many fights as these guys have under their belt, they've made a lot of money in mixed martial arts. Are they just now, do they look at themselves, okay, if they go for the run, if they try to become heavyweight champion, it doesn't work out, if Andrei Arlovsky happens to lose this fight as well, is he thinking about the heavyweight championship, or does he realize that, you know what, I can just be a professional fighter, go out, entertain the crowd, continue this journey, or are most people obsessed with becoming the champion?
It's tough to say. I think when on these guys' last runs, Arlovsky's had a few last runs now. Arlovsky's been written off more than once.
Not by us.
Not by us, but by, hey, this is something that pops up over and over again in our conversations, but it's societal. You see a guy lose and, you got to retire. You see a guy win, it's like, he's got to fight for the title. There's a lot of gray areas, and making a career in combat sports is one of those. Now, you do have to carry that truth, and that is that you get hit in the head a lot. It's not going to be good for you. You get hit in the head by 265-pounders a lot. We know that's not good for you. So you have to balance that out. Still making money, still entertaining people, still getting better. Still, your skills get better, your timing gets better, your understanding, the calm nature in which you can work in the chaos, that all improves. But the amount of damage that you take in your back and your knees and your head and all those things, that piles up too. So that's a part of the conversation you have when you talk about Frank Mir, Andrei Arlovsky, and Mark Hunt, any of these heavyweight fighters, Josh Barnett, who is, in my opinion, one of the great heavyweights ever, too. It is a great time for the heavyweight division. I think it's great that over the next month or 2 months or 2.5 months, there's going to be a lot of the best heavyweights in action, and we'll be talking about them again, and I think that's a good thing.
UFC 200, the former champion Cain Velasquez, a big assignment in Travis Brown. We know his durability. He's a gamer. The guy can inflict a lot of damage. Just go back and look at that fight with Andrei Arlovski. Spectacular. Right now at AKA, these guys are getting ready for the biggest fights ever in the history of their camps. Daniel Cormier couldn't do it the first time against John Jones. He has a chance to do what he couldn't do. Luke Rockhold, on the other hand, got the job done, but he knows that Chris Weidman is gunning for his title. This must be very good for Cain Velasquez to be in a room with guys like this as he's getting ready for this dangerous Travis Brown.
These guys are either all coming out better than they've ever been, or they're all coming out broken down like crazy, because they will be beating each other up. And that conversation about how much to train and how hard to push you, that is still an ongoing conversation. But these three elites of the elite believe that pushing each other as hard as they're capable of pushing each other has made raising tides rise all boats, or whatever the saying is. They've all gotten better as a result.
There has to be some inner conflict. We've talked to Cain Velasquez, who said, you know, the reason why I got to the point that I got is because I pushed through the pain, that I dug deep, that I dealt with injuries, that I just pushed through it. But now he says he has to reel back the training. They have to understand when it is time to relax and recover as you get the best gains that way.
You imagine the guys who are able to beat everybody, work harder than everybody. That's in them. That desire to work harder gets them to the top. And that desire to work harder prevents them from recovering and gets them hurt too. And they're all related. It's all connected.
The heavyweights will be the focus this weekend. Tune in to FN at 11 a.m. this Sunday as we present a 1-hour preview show looking ahead to Andrei Arlovski and Alistair Overeem in the Netherlands, and then keep it locked to FN at noon for the official prelims.